like to welcome our first two guests in this very first segment of the show today, which would be Dr. Myra Virgil, who is the Managing Director of the Bermuda Community Foundation, and Ms. Allison Towlson, who's the Managing Director of the Bank of Bermuda Foundation. Welcome to the two of you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Hello. Well, thanks for having us.
Okay, thank you. So just to start off, we'd like to give you the opportunity, because I know we had some discussion prior to the show about what your respective organizations do, and it seems like you both do a lot. So I think it's best if we leave it to you to explain in your own words, what do your respective foundations do, and what type of work do you engage in, even before this pandemic? I think, Dr. Myra Virgil, let's start with you.
Okay. So the Bermuda Community Foundation is a grant-making organization, and what we do is we manage charitable funds for a variety of unrelated donors. That's what we do in our ordinary business, and we make grants annually from our own funding, but also from those donors. We manage their giving. We also produce something called the Vital Signs Report, which is about quality of life in Bermuda and what priorities we have to focus our collective energies on improving. So that's what we do in normal days, and we can talk about what the emergency pieces look like after Allison gets a chance.
Sure. I like that vital signs plug that you put in there, and remind me if I forget, remind me to ask you a bit more about that. Thank you for that. Ms. Allison Towlson, how about you?
Thanks, Ryan. So from our perspective, we're a private independent foundation, and at the core of what we do, we place a high priority on equity and investing in programs and services in the community that make sure that it's available to all in the community. And that's very important for us as a foundation. In terms of, a play on what Myra does, we're one of the donors in the community. And what we fund on an average year is about $3 million in support of nonprofit work, services, and programs. In addition, as you two both know, we fund scholarships. And so I want to do a little shameless plug and thank you. I'm really pleased to see our investment of our scholarship alumni working so really well. So we support about $800,000 a year in scholarships for students. This year, we've just closed our scholarship application process. Those scholarships are all financial needs based. So again, keeping equity at the core of what we do. We are a very small team. It's myself as a managing director and Vivian Carter, who's our director of programs. Vivian Carter has, years of extensive work in this area in philanthropic space, and she's been critical to the work of the CCRE, which we're going to talk about today.
So beginning with you, Ms. Towlson, and then we'll ask you, Dr. Virgil, how has COVID-19 affected your organization's ability, for example, to give scholarships? And for you, Dr. Virgil, how has it affected your organization's ability to operate in general? And how do you see post-COVID-19? You mentioned that you've given $800,000 per year in scholarships, right? Are we going to be able to continue to do that?
Yes, is the answer. So, it's been challenging from the standpoint, as it has been for most businesses and nonprofits, to shift to a virtual world, right? We operated in a space where we shared office space. So we had work where we could, collaborate a lot more easily than just having to get on, Zoom or other platforms. I will say one of the things that had happened very quickly for the foundation is our first grant cycle that we do. We closed that on March 19th. And we actually did an entire board meeting virtually. It was the first time we've ever done that. I'm pleased to say it went successfully. But at that first grant cycle, we were able to still make important decisions to support the nonprofit community. That grant cycle was about $1 million that we supported the nonprofit community. To your point in the question on scholarships, we have an investment fund, and our investment strategy is such that it is for the long term. And so the desire is that we weather the storms that come from the economic crisis so that we can still contribute to the community with funding and with scholarships. So yes, we intend to still provide important and meaningful scholarships. How things have changed is very much that scholarship process is now, we're talking about this just yesterday, moving virtually. The two of you went through that process and had face-to-face interviews. We're going to now be doing that on Zoom. So we're transitioning all of our work as most organizations have been doing.
Well, I know that
go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I know that's going to be a relief to the many students who are tuned in, because Brian and I personally have been, in touch with young Bermudians who said, well, one, individuals who have graduated and they're looking for jobs. And then you got other Bermudians who will look for summer jobs to fund their studies. And they're saying, well, I don't think that scholarships are going to be as readily available and accessible as they were pre-COVID-19. But I guess it's a great relief to hear from your organization that they will still be available.
Yes, very much so. Very much
so. And I was going to say the same thing, but Allison, you mentioned scholarships specifically, but I'm wondering, the Bank of Bermuda Foundation also does other programs and does work throughout the year, correct? So how has that been impacted?
Right. So from that perspective, that funding has not changed. So what we do is we have a strategic board meeting at the end of last year to talk about how we want to budget for this coming year. And what has happened in the pandemic, and we will be having a strategic meeting actually coming Thursday. At a time of pandemic, we need to go back and look at our budget. We need to look at it and say, is it adequate? Can we still contribute? And what does the need look like? So for a foundation, we focus very much on the need and wanting to meet those needs as best as possible. So we definitely will be looking at innovative ways to look at funding, how we give, what types of grants we give. And so that's work that we're all convening with our board on Thursday.
Perhaps before we go to you, Dr. Virgil, I thought that it would be interesting, right, to think that maybe there'd be more of a capacity if, for example, universities are shifting to online learning post-COVID-19 and you're not having the face-to-face interaction, so you don't have the room and board fees as you would ordinarily. So that'll be something interesting to see as we move forward.
Absolutely, and we're asking all of our scholarship applicants as we go through this process, what is your school doing? How is it transitioning? Will it be virtual? Will you need that funding now? Because we may be able to support more, as you say, through this virtual world.
Exactly. Dr. Virgil?
Yeah. So the Community Foundation has always had a really small staff because our fundamental belief is keep overheads low. It's myself, Michelle Grant, we have a part-time accountant, and we have a really amazing volunteer board. So what has changed for us, though, is that we've been managing anywhere from 40 to 50 donations from unrelated donors' funds, and we would do that sort of on a monthly basis. We, just in the month of April, going from something like 50 transactions a month to managing the emergency fund, which was about 350 transactions in the same period, has been the lift that we've had to make. But we've always been sort of, we can remotely access all of our technology is geared towards this type of work. So it was really just at the point when this hit, it was ramping up into emergency and a crisis response. And guys, I noticed that you asked about like types of donors, and I just wanted to kind of point out that in terms of that, this community lift, and then what is this third sector? The third sector is not just nonprofits, and nonprofits are doing what we call that they're on the front lines. They're delivering programs and services both as essential kind of emergency response, but also the day-to-day enrichment of our lives. So you get groups that are doing STEM, art, history, all these other programs that they're delivering to students in school, out of school, and often at no cost to the institution, right? So there's this whole network of the third sector that is donors, it's nonprofits, right? It's the public, and in fact, the government is a donor too. So it's actually bigger and encompasses all of us. And just in this experience with managing this rapid fire emergency fund and getting funds deployed to community groups, to people who've been doing some of this work, it tells us Bermuda is resilient. We care about the community. We're strong. We contribute. We got grants, guys, from $25 all the way up to $150,000. So everybody put what they could into that fund. And that's not even including what international businesses and companies and other groups did privately, both cash, getting supplies, as well as volunteering and all that sort of work. So this is teaching us a lot of things, which we already knew, but it's just kind of confirming how much of a caring community and a resilient community we are and we can be. And we're going to have to draw on that going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's refreshing to hear, Dr. Virgil. You mentioned a little bit about other types of charities and organizations, be that arts and history. What types of organizations do you support? I mean, we know that, for example, in response to this immediate crisis, you've probably had to shift, for example, and provide more immediate relief to people handing out food or mental health or substance abuse and homelessness. What types of organizations do both of your foundations support in general, and how has that been impacted by this current crisis?
So, do you want to go out?
No. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll start, because then you can lead into the CCRE work more broadly, and I think that takes us, to sort of the next level of the conversation. So, from Bank of Bermuda's foundation, we have 4 core areas. We support education, and all of that is around public education. We have a sector that we support, the healthy family. So we support the community for programs that are serving for, whether it's medicines and service of delivery for people that need that from a critical chronic care disease perspective. We also have an area called Connected Communities, and that really is bringing together programs that support the whole community, whether it's youth, sport, recreation, arts and culture and history. And then last but certainly not least is our economic participation segment. So we support programs that are looking to reskill, tool, provide support for the community to be able to be employed and independent and economically sustain themselves. And so those are the 4 core areas for us. And so when we look at the shift to what's happened with the pandemic, we were already supporting some of those organizations that sit in that essential services sort of crisis type space. Many of those, and some of those had come through with the first grant cycle we do 3 a year. So some of those have already received funds, but leaning into Myra's work and the work through the Bermuda Community Foundation, we saw a need to support that work as well as an organized group. And I'll hand this over to Myra now to talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so you guys, when most funders of all types, corporate, all these types, will have sort of the areas that their employees or that their companies care about supporting. And to a degree, because in part that's about doing good, you don't want to influence that unduly, because when you look at it and when you step back and kind of take an aerial view of giving, as a community foundation, we say that between people's interests and then plugging in where there are some needs, you can cover, we call it A to Z grant, from animals to zoos, right? So you can get the whole gamut of community work covered between people's interests and then plugging some gaps in. What the crisis did for us is it really caused us to start to think about how we have to coordinate both those dollars and that work. And because if you can imagine, everybody has ideas about what's important and everybody had ideas about what needs are. But at the end of the day, if you look locally, you look overseas, there are some core essential services. People need to eat, and people need shelter, and people need to be able to live, to manage their daily expenses. Food, in particular, is a thing that everybody needs access to here, everywhere, and that needed to be really quickly. We've also seen the other needs consistent with their jurisdictions, access to medication, protection from domestic violence, getting women and children who are fleeing situations a place to be safe. We saw people and have seen a lot of numbers into the emotional well-being hotline, 5431111, managed by the Bermuda Psychology Association of Volunteers. I saw a lot of hits because people are anxious, people are lonely, they are concerned, and so we saw those calls. So if you look at sort of, and they're all on our website, I'm not going to kind of lay this all up, but if you can see that Bermuda actually fell in line with, and working with the Emergency Measures Organization, we fell in line with those basic needs that when you're hungry, when you don't have money, and as it gets increasingly worse, this is where people go. They tend to fall on all of these extra services in addition to the public services. But you need, as a country, to have those people in place, those organizations in place. I say all that, but also to say that in our regular grant making, we look at what are you trying to achieve, and then again, those priorities for the community. How can we meet those priorities, those needs that the community has said are important, but based on a framework of good, solid program, evidence-based programming?
Excellent. I mean, it definitely seems as though the third sector has stepped right up, especially with your foundations in the midst of this crisis. We saw sort of a quick adaptation, a quick response as soon as the lockdown was in place, and as soon as people became unemployed, we saw a lot of charities step right in, grant making, making donations,
Mm-hmm.
coordinating different food packages, and all the rest. My question to you, and I guess we can start with you, Dr. Virgil. How long can you keep this up? I mean, I'm sure that you've seen an influx in funding and donations. Obviously, in a time of crisis, everybody sort of pools together, and there's an influx in resources and donations. And a lot of those are probably one-time donations where a company, for example, says, well, here's what we're going to contribute. Here's $100,000. How long, if this continues, how long do you think this will last? You know, are charities coping right now? Are some at risk of falling through? Is this work that you think you'll be able to sustain?
So that's such a big and good question, right? I'll take it. Let me take a stab. So when we all started to experience this COVID-19 pandemic, that was about March 15th, March 11th to March 15th in Bermuda, and we started to take action, shelter in place, all that sort of stuff. So that's about 8 to 9. And as I said, as a country, we responded, crisis response, emergency response, everybody's giving. And also at that point, we were coordinating with our group, the coordinated crisis response team, third sector, and getting that money and those resources in the places where they needed to be. Quick, rapid response. And to your point, you can't stay in that crisis mode. But what we have seen and what we learned, and now what we know, applying what we know in our experience, is that yes, we had some one-off emergency grants that had to be made to help some groups kind of continue to serve the populations that they were serving. But then we had this core set of essential service providers, like the food, the medicine, the mental health, all that sort of stuff, where we can actually see week on week, they report in, their numbers are rising. More people at the food bank, more people needing meals, more people. Can you help out with this hardship or that hardship? Those are what we call core essential service providers, and clearly they have to be sustained. But it's no longer at this point where we should be in an emergency crisis response. As a community now, we know how to do this. We got to think about staying afloat, and I don't have a perfect word yet, but sort of restoring, reconstructing what works, and maintaining those core services. But now that we're out of that sort of crisis response, we also have to be thinking, how do we ensure that those vital programs, the ones that are having impacts that impact our kids who, once they start going back to school, but also need help, how do we ensure that proportion of nonprofit, important, vital services are sustained? Because remember, they're taking a hit as well as sort of small businesses that don't make a lot of money and then don't have a profit. They'll see unemployment. They'll see all of the events and the campaigns and things that they normally use to raise money to deliver services for this community as a national service. They're going to see that hit. So there's really two streams of work that we now know we have to sustain as a community. There's that essential piece, which, as we all know, with unemployment and all that sort of stuff, we need to have a plan, and that's probably 3 months, 6 months. And then there's the other piece of let's not let our most important vital services fall apart when, as we start to go into phase 2 and 3, this is exactly what we need, right? So you're quite right. We're not going to stay in emergency. We have to be thinking restore, reconstruct, stay afloat. For some people, it's stay afloat because they're still unemployed, they're still hungry, and they're still poor.
Are you worried?
I think we all have to have a degree of healthy worry, and we all have to have a degree of how we're going to solve this, how we all going to share it. Because I was listening, somebody sent me a very cool podcast kind of lecture piece, and I don't want to misquote, but I thought it was so powerful I had to replay about 5 times. And in it said, the professor who was talking said, poor people and people who are hungry are less likely to have a moral test. They're going to do whatever they can because they're hungry, and they're going to try to feed their kids. And so we have to make sure that we take care of people and to the best that we can as a community, because that's our responsibility as good community members. And I'm not saying that people haven't been very generous and very helpful and very giving, but we have to continue to work together and be hopeful and thoughtful and caring and generous as we sustain through this next period of time. So I have healthy worry, but I also see that I'm not alone. We're all in this together. We have to keep together. We got great minds. And so, yes, but yes, but yes, we can do this. And I don't even have a word for what it looks like, but part of it is about staying afloat, and part of it is about ensuring and keeping the good that we have always had.
And I think if I can just touch on that as well, one of the things Myra said is it's not going to happen with just our two foundations, right? It is going to be a collaborative and collective work that needs to happen across the third sector, but also with all donors. And we know the donors have been extremely generous. And so we need to find ways as donors to be innovative, to find funding in creative ways, to really look at how we're giving, and is that giving making a capacity change in a way that is going to make some sustainable long-term positioning for the third sector. And so part of going through this process of the pandemic and working in this coordinated crisis effort, what it's highlighted for us as Bank of Bermuda Foundation, and it may be highlighting it for others in the sector, is we really need a strong third sector backbone organization, a brand new model for the sector that really is supporting the sector in a way that is not just advocacy, which by itself is very important, but is also research, it's data gathering, it's really identifying the need in the community, it's measuring the value and impact of the sector. It is really also looking at how nonprofits can collaborate, can be collective and efficient with the way that they work, so that we can sustain this very important work that really enriches the community as a whole.
And guys, in the short term, I think we have to work out this balance. We have to work out how do we sustain, keep people afloat, get money and meals and all these sorts of services to people right now in real time and sustain it for 3 to 6 months. And we also have to work out that balance of not letting our vital third sector infrastructure completely fall apart. And yes, some choices will have to be made. Let's keep it real. Of course, all choices are being made in all of the sectors, right? But they're all hurting. And this sector in particular, that now we can see has done such a lift in terms of being nimble and getting that stuff done. We got to find that balance. Yeah. We're going to have to, it's not over, right? Everybody knows it's not over, but if you're hungry, you know it's not over. If you're unemployed, you know it's not over. Absolutely. So we need to find that balance. And then as Allison's saying, there's kind of a middle to longer term view about how do we now use what we've learned and put in place the kind of structure so that we're all not like scrambling to make sure, like we already know, boom, essential service, emergency effort. That's what we're doing this. Next, this, sustain 3 months. And who knows, this whole shelter thing could go up and down. So we might have to just put in place those extra supports, boom, again. So we've got this rhythm, we've got this plan. We drew on all of our collective history of work and how we've always worked around hurricanes, layered a pandemic on top of that, have managed through the crisis. And now here we are. We know we now have probably about 3 to 6 months of where we headed with construction or renewed construction, perhaps a new way of doing things. And some people are saying, we this remote working is working for us, right? So that's going to be a whole game changer in terms of how we do work, how we approach all of these different elements, including giving. Right? There's some financial.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
I like a term that you used, Dr. Virgil, which was healthy worry. It's important to be honest and keep in mind, hey, we do have a little bit of concern about what this is going to look like after and sort of how long we can maintain this current situation. But at the same time, we have a certain level of optimism, right? Based off of the donations that have made to you thus far, based off of the support that's been provided. So we're a little bit concerned and a little bit worried, but at the same time, we are confident that we'll be able to find a way to get through this. And I appreciate that message. Now, you may not realize, because we've had such a productive conversation, but we've been on for just about 30 minutes now.
Oh my gosh!
To begin to wrap it up so that we can get to our next segment. But before we do that, Dr. Virgil, I did promise you a question about vital signs. I'm hoping maybe you can tie that in between you and Allison into your final thoughts. how, looking forward, is this vital signs report going to change? What sort of things need to be done now? And what are sort of your parting words as we look into the future? And as you say, shift now from a crisis immediate response mode into sort of forward thinking and recovery.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the question. So, you know, vital signs as a study, which was, we started in 2018, it's something that we revisit all the time, but it really, we ask the community via survey, what's important to you and what are some of the things within those areas of importance you would want to see changed or improved. And we got priorities. Now, to be honest, these are not, they're not skyrocket sort of responses. They're things like, we want to ensure we have better and affordable health care. We want to ensure that people are educated. We want to ensure that when we're doing workforce development, it ends in either better skilled people and a job at the end of the day want to be employed. So these are not, they're not like new, but it's the way of doing it in a standardized evidence-based way, based on what other jurisdictions are doing is new, to be honest with you. And what it also says is that when we're funding as a foundation, and when we're advising donors, we want to start directing people towards funding whatever they wish, but towards a priority, and then asking what was achieved as a consequence of that funding? What change did we actually bring about? So that when we redo this study in 3 more years, I think it is, then we're going to see and be able to track those improvements and then be able to say, do we still have more work to do? So that's vital signs in a nutshell. And frankly, how we do our giving as a community foundation, we think about those priorities and apply them on top of our process, so that we're asking those questions about when we are resourcing or funding a program, how do we know that we've made change, and what is that change, right? So those are important questions to ask whenever you put a donation or an investment into something. And so even with the emergency fund, we've been really careful and thoughtful about ensuring that we put information on the website so people can see what are the key areas and to what extent have they been funded. That's really important. What services have been provided. That's good community foundation practice, but that's also good for the community to start to see this is what your collective efforts have done. And again, it wasn't just the emergency fund. There were a group of donors from the corporate sector who helped with the hospital. People may not know that. There were meal programs that ran outside of the emergency fund. But this huge community effort, I think, is what has brought us through to this point where now we can start thinking about sustaining. Yeah. And it's a slightly different nuance what sustaining looks like, but sustaining is important, right? We now know we got a couple more months, and we got to figure out a sustained and thoughtful way, a balanced way of approaching. And that's what we're about. So
yeah. I know you're running tight on time, so I just want to wrap up and say, from the vital signs work, for us as a foundation, we've been starting to look at that work to try and embed it into our process. We're still going through a process of prioritization and evaluation of that work, because it's critical for us as a foundation. We are investing, and we use that word intentionally because we want to see a return, and that is the return as an impact to the community. And so in order to do that, we need to be able to have some measurements of outcomes, and that vital signs work leads into that for us as an organization. I just want to also thank our board, who has been incredibly supportive, engaged in this work, and I look forward to sitting down with them on Thursday to go through this COVID crisis and really talk about what we're going to do as a foundation going forward.
Thank you very much.
And Erin and Ryan, can we do a shout out, please?
Go ahead.
Okay, so you know what, just because we haven't had time to be publicizing any stories or anything like that, but the Third Sector Coordinated Crisis Response Team, and I'll do it by organization. It's the Bank of Bermuda Foundation, the Community Foundation, but also Age Concern Bermuda, the interagency. Oh my God!
For children and families.
For children and families, thank you. IEC, Nicola, and then we had 2 private individuals, Tina Nash, Danielle Riviere, and am I forgetting anybody? So,
well, just Vivian, but you mentioned
and so Vivian, Carter, and Allison both deployed their resources from the foundation. The Community Foundation loaned me to this effort. So when we say coordinated, we're doing this on top of our work, right? So because we knew that we needed to somehow all get on the same page, and all get on the same page in terms of collecting money and dispersing it, and using all of our access points make sure that it got where it needed to be. So I just want to kind of shout that out.
Of
and also
course,
thank the
absolutely.
donors
Yep.
and thank the community
Yep.
and thank everybody, because it wasn't just us. We've had people
Correct.
stepped right up into, well, let's help get this food delivered in like hundreds of meals, not just a few, 100, 150 at a serving, 400, 500, that's big. And so, some of the nonprofits and community groups just step right into that space, the churches. And I don't think we can say enough, because we need to keep going.
Yes,
So
I know.
nobody feels left out of that, what that has meant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to thank the two of you for having us on, because it's important that people understand the depth and breadth of the work that is still ongoing, very much ongoing.
Yeah.
One thing is clear is that you both are passionate individuals, and what you need in the third sector is passionate individuals. So that's a relief to hear. It is comforting to know that you guys are hard at work. So thank you for your hard work on behalf of not only our listening audience, but also the beneficiaries, which, as you know, Allison, include Brian and myself.
Shout out to alumni.
Yes.
And so we're grateful for your time, and we wish you the best as you move forward, and thank you for your continued work and efforts. Ryan?
Yeah, and no worries if you think you missed anybody, Dr. Virgil, because I believe we've had some banners going across the screen thanking certain people. And we can see from our live feedback and commentary, we've had some comments come in from Shaz Wolf, who says, Bank of Bermuda Foundation is awesome. I had contact about 30 years ago as a single mother, and it's glad to see that they're still going strong. We had somebody else ask where they can find support, and Tina Nash, who's an absolute gem, commented right in and said you can find all the details on the Facebook page, Third Sector Coordinated Crisis Response Effort. And Tamalita Joseph also says Bank of Bermuda Foundation, Equity for All. Thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. Myra Virgil, Managing Director of the Bermuda Community Foundation. Thank you very much, Ms. Allison Towlson, Managing Director of the Bank of Bermuda Foundation. It's been a great 35-minute chat with you. We hope that the general public enjoyed the discussion and interview. Yeah, it was so great that we didn't even notice time passes by. But honestly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I'm sure the community thanks you as well. And have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. Thank you for the time.